You are not weak because life is hard. You are weak because you react. Every reaction gives away power. Every emotional outburst hands control to someone else. This audiobook will teach you one truth. The moment you stop reacting, you start winning. Emotional detachment is not coldness, it is dominance. It is the ability to observe without collapsing, to move without noise, and to act without needing validation. If you master this, people cannot manipulate you, situations cannot shake you, and life cannot control you. This is not motivation, this is mental authority. Listen carefully, because once you see this, you cannot unsee it.
Chapter 1. Stop reacting or stay controlled. You need to hear this clearly. Most of your problems are not caused by people. They are caused by your reactions. You don't lose power because someone insults you. You lose power the moment you react to it. That's the key. Life does not control you. People do not control you. Your reactions do. Every emotional reaction is a transfer of authority. You hand it over without thinking. Anger, defensiveness, explaining, justifying, proving. Each one is a signal that says, you have access to me. You have a choice, always. But most people never pause long enough to see it. Let's break this down. Reaction is automatic. Control is trained. When someone criticizes you and your chest tightens, that's automatic. When someone ignores you and your mood collapses, that's automatic. When something doesn't go your way and you lash out, that's automatic. And automatic behavior is predictable behavior. Predictable people are easy to control. That's why emotional people are always manipulated, not because they are weak, but because they are exposed. You don't need to stop feeling. You need to stop acting from feeling. That's the distinction. That's the discipline. Most people believe emotions are commands. They are not. They are signals. Anger is a signal. Fear is a signal. Hurt is a signal. But a signal is not an order. You have a choice. You can feel the emotion and still choose your response. That pause right there, that pause is power. The strongest people you've ever met were not loud. They were not reactive. They did not rush to respond. They watched, they waited, they chose. That's why they always seemed calm in chaos. That's why they always walked away with the upper hand. Calm is not weakness. Calm is control. Now understand this. People will test you emotionally, not consciously, but instinctively. They raise their voice, they provoke, they pressure, they guilt, they accuse, and they watch. They watch to see if you flinch. They watch to see if you react. They watch to see if they can move you emotionally. The moment you react, you give them information. You reveal where you are attached. You reveal where you are sensitive. That's the flaw. Not emotion, exposure. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about discipline. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need their approval to pause. You don't need to respond immediately to prove anything. Urgency is emotional manipulation. Think about it. Why does everything emotional demand speed? Answer now. Explain yourself. React. Defend. Say something. Power never rushes. You have a choice. Slow down or stay controlled. Here's a rule you must adopt. The stronger the emotion, the slower the response. That's the key. When emotions spike, most people speed up. They talk more, they explain more, they justify more, and every word weakens their position. Silence, on the other hand, strengthens it. Silence is not avoidance. Silence is containment. You are not ignoring the situation. You are mastering yourself inside it. Now let's get practical. From today forward, you train one behavior. When something triggers you, pause. Not for hours, not for days, just long enough to break the automatic response. Breathe once. Observe the emotion. Name it internally. This is anger. This is fear. This is the need to be understood. Then ask yourself one question. What response keeps my power? Not what feels good, not what feels justified. What keeps your power? Sometimes the answer is silence. Sometimes it's a short sentence. Sometimes it's walking away. Sometimes it's doing nothing at all. Doing nothing is still a decision, and often it's the strongest one. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't need to react to every emotional pull. That's the trap. People who react feel alive in the moment, but they stay stuck long term. People who control their reactions feel uncomfortable at first, but they dominate long term. You have a choice, short-term relief or long-term authority. Now understand this deeply. Detachment begins here, not in isolation, not in withdrawal, but in reaction control. If you cannot control your reactions, you cannot detach. If you cannot detach, you cannot think clearly. If you cannot think clearly, you cannot lead your life. That's the chain. Reaction equals confusion. Control equals clarity. And clarity changes everything. You start seeing people for who they are, not how they make you feel. You start seeing situations for what they are, not how they trigger you. You stop personalizing. You stop internalizing. You stop absorbing chaos that isn't yours. Observe, don't absorb. That's the discipline. Most people don't need more confidence. They need fewer reactions. Confidence is quiet. Insecurity is loud. The louder the emotional response, the less power behind it. So when you feel the urge to react, remember this. You have a choice. That's the key. You don't need their permission. The moment you pause, you step out of control and into command. And once you experience that feeling, that calm, that inner steadiness, you will never want to go back. You mastered the first discipline, reaction control. Now you're ready for the deeper layer, because once reactions stop controlling you, you begin to realize something uncomfortable. You've been explaining yourself far too much. And that brings us to the next lesson.
Chapter 2. Emotional detachment is not coldness. Let's clear this confusion right now. Emotional detachment is not coldness. It is not cruelty. It is not lack of care. That misunderstanding keeps people weak. They believe if they detach, they will become heartless. They believe if they don't react emotionally, they will lose connection. They believe emotions are proof of humanity. That's the lie. Emotions are human, but uncontrolled emotions are a liability. It's not about being cold, it's about being clear. That's the key. You don't become powerful by killing emotion. You become powerful by placing emotion in its proper role. Emotion is a passenger, not the driver. Most people let emotion drive their decisions. That's why their lives feel unstable. That's why they regret what they say. That's why they constantly clean up emotional messes. You have a choice. Emotion can inform you or control you, and that choice defines your life. Let's look at the difference. A reactive person feels emotion and acts immediately. A detached person feels emotion and waits. Same emotion, different outcome. That pause changes everything. Detachment is not indifference. Detachment is self-respect. You respect yourself enough not to let temporary feelings sabotage permanent goals. You respect your future enough to disappoint your impulses. That's discipline. It's not about lack of feeling, it's about mastery. Think about the people you admire most: the calm leader, the composed professional, the person who doesn't lose control under pressure. Do you see them as cold? No. You see them as stable, grounded, trustworthy. That's emotional detachment in action. Now look at the opposite. The person who cries easily, explodes quickly, needs constant reassurance, overreacts to small things. They feel deeply, but they suffer constantly. Emotion without discipline is self-harm. That's the hard truth. You don't need to become less emotional. You need to become emotionally intelligent. And emotional intelligence begins with separation. You are not your emotions. You experience emotions. That distinction alone will free you. Say this internally when emotions rise. This is happening inside me. It is not me. That's the key. When you identify as the emotion, you lose control. When you observe the emotion, you gain leverage. Observe, don't absorb. You have a choice. Now let's talk about attachment, because this is where people get trapped. You don't suffer because you care. You suffer because you are attached to outcomes, reactions, and expectations. You want people to understand you. You want them to respond a certain way. You want validation. You want reassurance. And when you don't get it, emotions spike. That's not love. That's dependence. It's not about connection. It's about control, external control over your emotional state. Detachment means this: you care, but you are not owned by the outcome. You can love someone deeply and still remain emotionally sovereign. You can work hard and still detach from immediate results. You can give effort without emotional desperation. That's power. You don't need their permission to stay balanced. You don't need their response to stay calm. You don't need their validation to stay grounded. That's the discipline. Here's a hard rule you must accept. The more emotionally attached you become, the more fragile you become. Attachment amplifies pain. Detachment contains it. Pain will still exist. Loss will still exist. Disappointment will still exist. But suffering multiplies only when you cling. You have a choice: cling or stand. Detachment does not mean you don't care. It means you don't collapse. And collapsing helps no one. Now let's make this practical. When emotions rise, do this. First, label the emotion: anger, fear, sadness, need. Naming creates distance. Second, ask, what story am I telling myself right now? Most emotions are fueled by stories. They don't respect me. I'm not enough. This always happens. Stories intensify emotion. Third, choose discipline over impulse. It's not about expression, it's about regulation. You don't say everything you feel. You don't act on every urge. You don't chase every emotional high. That restraint is strength. Weak people vent. Strong people contain. Containment creates clarity. Clarity creates power. That's the key. Now understand this. People may accuse you of being distant when you stop reacting. Let them. They are uncomfortable because they lost access. They can no longer push emotional buttons. They can no longer control the emotional temperature. That's not your problem. You don't need their permission to evolve. Detachment will cost you emotional chaos, but it will give you peace. It will cost you approval, but it will give you authority. And authority is far more valuable.
Here's another truth. Emotionally detached people are more reliable, not less loving. They don't lash out, they don't manipulate, they don't punish with emotion. They respond with intention. That makes them safer, stronger, more respected. It's not about coldness, it's about consistency. Consistency builds trust. Uncontrolled emotion destroys it. You have a choice. Now, let's bring this back to the core theme. Emotional detachment is power because it removes leverage from the outside world. People can still speak, situations can still change, but they no longer own your internal state. You reclaim authority over your mind. That's the ultimate goal. And once you stop confusing detachment with coldness, you stop apologizing for your calm. You stop explaining your restraint. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You stand steady. You mastered reaction control. You understood that detachment is not cruelty, it's clarity. Now you're ready for the next discipline, because even emotionally detached people lose power when they over-explain. You learn to feel without reacting. Now it's time to stop justifying your existence.
Chapter 3. Stop explaining yourself to people who don't care. This chapter will make you uncomfortable because it exposes one of the biggest leaks of personal power: over-explaining. You explain your decisions. You explain your boundaries. You explain your silence. You explain your growth. And every explanation weakens you. That's the key. You don't explain because people need clarity. You explain because you want approval. Let's be honest. Most explanations are not about communication. They are about emotional safety. You want people to understand you so they won't judge you. You want them to agree so you won't feel rejected. You want reassurance that you're still accepted. That's not confidence. That's emotional dependence. It's not about clarity. It's about control. External control over how you feel about yourself. You have a choice. Explain or stand firm. Here's the truth most people avoid. People who genuinely respect you don't require explanations. They observe your consistency. They observe your actions. They adjust. People who demand explanations are usually looking for leverage. They want to debate your decision. They want to weaken your boundary. They want to pull you back into emotional engagement. And the moment you explain, you step into their frame. That's the trap. Explanation invites negotiation. Negotiation invites manipulation. Silence, on the other hand, ends the conversation. Silence says, "This is decided. This is not up for discussion. This does not require your approval. You don't need their permission." Now let's get specific. Why do you explain yourself? Because someone questioned you? Because someone looked disappointed? Because someone implied you were wrong? Because someone made you feel guilty? That guilt is emotional pressure, and most people cave under it. They rush to justify. They rush to soften. They prove they are reasonable. But reasonable people are often controlled people. Strong people are not rushed into explaining. They understand one thing clearly: not everyone deserves access to your reasoning. That's the key. Your reasoning is personal. Your decision-making process is private. Your boundaries are not group projects. You can be respectful without being exposed. You can be kind without being exposed. It's not about arrogance, it's about discipline. You have a choice. Now listen carefully. Over-explaining is a reaction, just like anger, just like defensiveness. It's an emotional reflex. Someone challenges you, your nervous system reacts. You feel the urge to restore balance, so you talk. And the more you talk, the weaker your position becomes. Why? Because explanations reveal insecurity. The more uncertain you feel, the more you explain.
The grounded you feel, the less you say. That pattern is universal. Look at leaders. They don't over-explain. They announce decisions. Look at emotionally strong people. They don't justify boundaries. They enforce them. Now look at emotionally reactive people. They explain, apologize, and defend, often without being asked. That's the flaw. Not kindness, not empathy. It's the lack of internal authority. It's not about being rude. It's about being resolved. Resolution ends discussion. You don't need their permission to be resolved. Here's a rule you must adopt. If someone genuinely wants to understand you, they will listen without demanding justification. If they demand justification, they are not seeking understanding, they are seeking control. That's the key. So what do you do instead? You shorten your responses, you simplify your words, you remove emotional detail. Not cold, clear. For example, instead of, "I just feel like I've been under a lot of pressure lately and I really need space to focus on myself, and I hope you understand," you say, "I need space right now." That's it. No story, no defense, no apology. You have a choice. Instead of, "I didn't mean it that way, you misunderstood me. What I was trying to say was," you say, "I'm clear on my position." Silence follows. That silence will feel uncomfortable at first because you're used to filling space with explanations. But discomfort is growth. The urge to explain is the urge to be liked. The discipline to stay silent is the discipline to be respected. Respect lasts longer. Now understand this clearly. Some people will react negatively when you stop explaining. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're distant. They'll say you're cold. What they really mean is this: you no longer manage my emotions for me. That's not your responsibility. You don't need their permission to grow. Over-explaining keeps you emotionally attached. Silence creates detachment, and detachment is power. When you stop explaining, 3 things happen. First, people stop arguing with you. There's nothing to push against. Second, people start watching your actions instead of your words. That builds authority. Third, you conserve emotional energy, energy that you can now invest in discipline, focus, and growth. That's the trade. Explain less, live more. Now, let's address a fear you might have. But what if they misunderstand me? Let them. Misunderstanding is not dangerous. Emotional exhaustion is. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You need to be aligned with yourself. That's the key. Misunderstood people still succeed. Misunderstood people still lead. Misunderstood people still win. But emotionally drained people don't. Here's another truth. You explain because you are emotionally attached to how others see you. Detachment begins when you release that attachment. You have a choice. Ask yourself before explaining anything, is this explanation for clarity or for comfort? If it's for comfort, stop. Comfort keeps you small. Discipline builds strength. It's not about communication, it's about self-trust. When you trust yourself, you don't rush to convince others. Convincing is insecurity. Consistency is confidence. Say less, stand more. And understand this, you are not cutting people off by explaining less. You are cutting off emotional dependency. That's growth. Now bring this back to the core theme. Emotional detachment grows when you stop giving people access to your internal world unnecessarily. Reactions gave away power. Over-explaining gave away authority. Both are habits. Both can be unlearned. You've learned to pause your reactions. You've learned that detachment is clarity, not coldness. Now you've learned to protect your decisions with silence. You are building emotional sovereignty. And the next step is even more powerful. Because once you stop reacting and stop explaining, you realize something shocking. You've been emotionally attached to outcomes. You mastered restraint. Now it's time to release expectation.
Chapter 4. Detach from outcomes to gain control. This is where most people lose their power. Not in effort, not in discipline, but in expectation. You do the work, but you need a certain result. You speak, but you need a certain reaction. You give, but you need appreciation. And the moment you need the outcome, you lose control of yourself. That's the key. Attachment to outcomes creates desperation. Desperation destroys leverage. You have a choice. Act with discipline or act with need. And need is weakness. Let's be clear. Detaching from outcomes does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop being emotionally owned by results. It's not about laziness. It's about internal stability. Most people are emotionally unstable because their peace depends on what happens next. If it goes well, they're calm. If it doesn't, they collapse. That is not strength. That is emotional gambling. You don't need their permission to stay grounded. You don't need success today to respect yourself today. You don't need guarantees to act with confidence. That's discipline. Outcome attachment sounds innocent, but it's destructive. I'll be happy when this works. I'll relax when they respond. I'll feel confident when I succeed. No. That mindset keeps you anxious, reactive, and impatient. It's not about ambition, it's about emotional dependency. You have a choice. Here's the hard truth. The more you care about the outcome, the worse you perform. Athletes know this. Negotiators know this. Leaders know this. The moment you become desperate to win, you start making emotional decisions. You overreach. You overtalk. You overcommit. Calm performers outperform emotional ones every time. That's the key. Detachment sharpens performance. Attachment clouds judgment. Think about it. When you're emotionally attached, you rush. When you're detached, you think. When you're attached, you fear loss. When you're detached, you focus on execution. Execution wins. Emotion drains. It's not about results, it's about process. That's the discipline. Now let's talk about where outcome attachment shows up most. Relationships, work, approval, money. In relationships, attachment looks like this. You need reassurance. You overanalyze messages. You fear silence. That fear makes you behave in ways that push people away. Detachment does the opposite. Detached people don't chase responses. They don't panic over distance. They don't negotiate their worth. They show up fully, but they don't beg for outcomes. That's power. In work, attachment looks like this. You tie your self-worth to results. You panic when things slow down. You overwork to control uncertainty. Detached professionals focus on effort, not applause. They build skill. They build consistency. Results follow, but they don't emotionally chase them. You have a choice. Now here's the shift you must make. Stop asking, did it work? Start asking, did I execute correctly? That's the key. Outcome-focused people feel constantly behind. Process-focused people compound progress. Detach emotionally from results, but stay committed to action. That balance is rare, and it's powerful. Let me say this clearly. Detachment from outcomes does not reduce success. It increases it. Why? Because you stop forcing, you stop chasing, you leak energy into worry. Calm execution beats emotional effort. Every time. Now, let's make this practical. From today forward, apply this rule. You are responsible for actions, not reactions, not results. You send the message, but you don't chase the reply. You do the work, but you don't beg for recognition. You set the boundary, but you don't manage their emotions. You have a choice. Here's a daily discipline. Before any important action, say this internally: I commit to the action, not the outcome. That sentence will stabilize your nervous system. It removes pressure. It removes fear. It removes emotional noise. And when pressure leaves, performance rises. That's the key. Now let's talk about something uncomfortable. Outcome attachment is often disguised as motivation. People say, I care a lot. What they mean is, I'm afraid to lose. Fear-based effort burns you out. Discipline-based effort sustains you. It's not about caring less, it's about needing less. Needing less makes you calmer. Calmer makes you sharper. Sharper makes you more effective. That's the chain. Here's another truth. The person who is willing to walk away always has the advantage. In conversations, in negotiations, in life. Why? Because they are not emotionally cornered. Detachment gives you the power to say, this works for me, or it doesn't. No drama, no pleading, no collapse. You don't need their permission to walk away from what costs your peace. Now let's connect this back to emotional detachment. Reactions controlled your behavior. Explanations leaked your authority. Outcome attachment traps your peace in the future. Detachment brings everything back to the present. Right now. This action. This moment. That's power. When you detach from outcomes, something strange happens. You become harder to manipulate. People can't bait you with promises. They can't threaten you with loss, because you are already emotionally complete. You act because it's right, not because you're desperate. That's the key. Let me be direct. If your mood depends on results, you are not in control. If your peace depends on others' responses, you are not free. Freedom comes from internal authority. You have a choice. Now, one last instruction. When things don't go your way, and they won't, do not emotionally negotiate with reality. Don't say, this shouldn't have happened. Don't collapse into frustration. Say instead, this happened. What's my next disciplined move? That question keeps you powerful, detached, clear, forward-moving. You don't need their permission to continue. You don't need guarantees to stay disciplined. That's emotional detachment in action. You have now learned a critical truth. Detachment from outcomes doesn't make you passive. It makes you unstoppable. You mastered reaction control. You stopped explaining yourself. You released emotional attachment to results. Now, you are ready for the next level. Because once you stop chasing outcomes, you gain the ability to see people clearly. Patterns, motives, intentions. You stop absorbing them. You start observing them. And that is where real power begins.
Chapter 5. Observe people instead of absorbing them. This chapter changes how you see everyone, because most of your emotional exhaustion does not come from your life. It comes from other people's emotions that you absorb without realizing it. That's the flaw. Not sensitivity, not empathy. Absorption without discipline. You feel what they feel. You carry what they carry. You react to what they project. And slowly, silently, you lose yourself. That's the key. You have a choice. Observe or absorb. And that choice determines whether you stay powerful or drained. Let's be clear. Absorbing people's emotions is not kindness. It is lack of boundaries. Observing people's behavior is not coldness. It is clarity. Most people confuse the two. They think being understanding means taking everything personally. They think being good means emotionally participating in every situation. That belief keeps them exhausted. You don't need their permission to protect your inner space. Now listen carefully. Emotionally detached people do something different. They watch patterns. They listen to tone. They observe behavior over time. They do not internalize every mood shift. They do not personalize every reaction. They gather information. That's the discipline. Absorbers ask, "What did I do wrong?" Observers ask, "What is happening here?" That single shift changes everything. When someone snaps at you, an absorber feels attacked. An observer notices stress. When someone pulls away, an absorber panics. An observer notices distance. When someone manipulates, an absorber feels guilty. An observer sees the tactic. That's the key. Observation creates emotional distance. Distance creates power. You have a choice. Now let's talk about why absorbing is so common. Because most people were taught this lie. If someone is upset, it's your responsibility to fix it. No. You are responsible for your behavior, not their emotions. It's not about compassion, it's about emotional ownership. Taking ownership of emotions that aren't yours is self-betrayal. You don't need their permission to stop doing that. Here's a hard truth. Manipulation only works on people who absorb. Guilt only works on people who internalize. Drama only works on people who engage. Detached observers are immune. Why? Because they don't react emotionally first. They analyze. And analysis breaks emotional control. That's the key. Now, let's make this practical. From today forward, when someone's energy shifts, pause. Don't respond immediately. Don't explain. Don't apologize. Observe. Ask yourself silently, what am I noticing? Tone, timing, pattern. Is this consistent behavior or emotional discharge? Is this about me or about them? Is this a request or a manipulation? You have a choice. Most people skip observation and jump straight to emotion. That's how they get pulled into chaos. Observation slows the moment. Slowness restores control. It's not about being distant, it's about being awake. Let's talk about emotional projection. People project their insecurity, anger, and fear onto others constantly. If you absorb it, you carry it. If you observe it, it dissolves. Projection requires participation. When you stop participating emotionally, projection fails. That's power. Here's an example. Someone accuses you of something unfair. Absorber response: defend, explain, feel attacked. Observer response: silence, curiosity, assessment. Who has control? The observer. Because while the other person is emotional, the observer is strategic. You don't need their permission to stay strategic. Another example. Someone constantly complains. Absorbers listen, feel heavy, and get drained. Observers notice the pattern and limit exposure. That's not cruelty. That's self-respect. It's not about empathy. It's about emotional hygiene. You wouldn't drink dirty water every day. Why consume emotional toxicity? You have a choice. Now let's address a fear. But if I don't absorb, won't I lose connection? No. You lose enmeshment, not connection. Healthy connection does not require emotional fusion. It requires clarity and boundaries. In fact, observing people makes relationships healthier. You stop reacting impulsively. You stop taking things personally. You stop escalating emotions. Calm presence stabilizes others. That's the irony. Detached observers often become emotional anchors because they don't add fuel. That's the key. Now here's a discipline you must practice daily. When you leave a conversation, ask yourself, did I absorb or did I observe? If you feel drained, irritated, or confused, you absorbed. If you feel calm and clear, you observed. Awareness builds discipline. Next step, containment. If someone brings emotional chaos, you do not match it. You lower your tone. You slow your speech. You shorten your responses. You don't mirror emotional intensity, you regulate it. That's leadership. You don't need their permission to regulate the room. Let me say this directly. Emotionally weak people mirror emotions. Emotionally strong people set the emotional temperature. You choose which one you are. That's the key. Now understand this. Observation is not passive, it is active restraint. It takes strength not to react. It takes discipline not to absorb. But once trained, it becomes natural, and the benefits compound. You stop feeling responsible for everyone. You stop feeling emotionally hijacked. You stop losing energy to nonsense. You become selective. Selective attention, selective engagement, selective response. That's emotional detachment. Here's another instruction. When someone is emotional, do not rush to resolve it. Resolution is often manipulation disguised as urgency. Let emotions settle. Let patterns reveal themselves. Time exposes truth. That's the key. Most people react to moments. Observers watch trends. Trends don't lie. And once you start observing patterns, you gain an unfair advantage. You see who is consistent. You see who is unstable. You see who respects boundaries and who tests them. You don't confront emotionally. You adjust strategically. That's power. Now connect this back to the theme. You controlled reactions. You stopped explaining. You detached from outcomes. Now you stop absorbing people. This is emotional detachment at a deeper level. You reclaim mental space. You reclaim emotional energy. You reclaim clarity. And with clarity comes the next realization. Your biggest weakness was never emotion. It was seeking validation. Because absorbers crave approval. Observers don't. And that is the next discipline. You learned to watch without absorbing. Now it's time to stop needing reassurance. Because the moment you stop seeking validation, you become unshakable. You have a choice. Stay emotionally dependent or become internally anchored. That's the key.
Chapter 6. Stop seeking validation and start building authority. This chapter cuts the final chord, because as long as you seek validation, you are not free. You may look confident, you may sound composed, but if approval still moves you, you are still controlled. That's the key. Validation seeking is the quiet addiction nobody admits. It hides behind politeness. It hides behind productivity. It hides behind being nice. But it is still dependence. You have a choice. Seek approval or build authority. And you cannot do both. Let's be clear. Validation feels good, but it costs you power. Authority feels uncomfortable at first, but it gives you freedom. It's not about arrogance, it's about self-authorization. You don't need their permission. Now understand this. Validation seeking shows up in subtle ways. You check reactions after you speak. You adjust your behavior to avoid disapproval. You soften truths to stay liked. You hesitate before acting because you might be judged. Those pauses are not wisdom, they are fear. It's not about humility, it's about insecurity. That's the flaw. Not kindness, not empathy. Lack of internal approval. Authority begins the moment you stop outsourcing your self-worth. That's the key. Most people wait for permission to feel confident, permission from praise, permission from likes, permission from agreement. And while they wait, they shrink. You don't need permission to stand tall. You don't need permission to decide. You don't need permission to move forward. You have a choice. Let's talk about the cost of validation seeking. When you seek validation, you hesitate. When you hesitate, opportunities pass. When opportunities pass, resentment builds, and resentment turns into quiet anger toward others and toward yourself. That cycle keeps people stuck. Authority breaks it. Authority says, I decide what matters. I choose my standards. I approve of myself. That inner approval is rare, and that's why it's powerful. Now let's separate two ideas. Confidence is how you feel. Authority is how you act. Confidence fluctuates. Authority is consistent. You don't wait to feel confident to act with authority. You act with authority, and confidence follows. That's the discipline. It's not about feeling ready. It's about being resolved. You have a choice. Now consider this. The people who seek validation talk more. They explain more. They adjust more. The people with authority say less. They move decisively. They let results speak. That's the pattern. Authority does not ask, is this okay with you? Authority states, this is what I'm doing. No drama, no justification, no apology. You don't need their permission. Now here's a hard truth. If you are afraid of being disliked, you will never be respected. Respect requires the willingness to disappoint. That's the key. Disappointment is not cruelty, it's clarity. People may not like your boundaries. They may not like your growth. They may not like your silence. Let them. You are not here to be digestible. You are here to be grounded. It's not about approval. It's about alignment. Now let's get practical. From today forward, adopt this rule. Before acting, ask, is this aligned or is this for approval? If it's for approval, stop. If it's aligned, proceed. That single filter will change your behavior. Next rule. Stop announcing your plans. Announcement is often a request for validation. Execution is authority. Build quietly. Move silently. Let outcomes reveal your position. That's discipline. Another rule. When praised, don't inflate. When criticized, don't collapse. Both are forms of emotional dependence. Praise does not define you. Criticism does not destroy you. You observe both. You adjust behavior if necessary, but your self-worth stays untouched. That's emotional detachment. You have a choice. Now let's address the fear underneath validation seeking. Rejection. Most people fear rejection not because it hurts, but because it threatens identity. If they don't approve of me, who am I? That question reveals the problem. When your identity is internal, external reactions lose power. Authority is identity anchored inside. Say this internally. I approve of myself. Say it often. Say it without apology. That's the key. Authority grows through repetition. Every time you act without seeking approval, you strengthen internal trust. Every time you choose alignment over acceptance, you become more solid. At first, it will feel lonely because approval is noisy. Authority is quiet. But quiet builds strength. Now understand this. Seeking validation keeps you emotionally attached to people's opinions. Attachment creates anxiety. Anxiety clouds judgment. Authority clears the mind. When you don't need approval, you listen better. You see patterns more clearly. You act with precision. That's power. Let me be direct. If your mood rises and falls based on reactions, you are still externally controlled.
Freedom begins when reactions become irrelevant. Not ignored, irrelevant. You have a choice. Now here's a final behavioral instruction. For the next week, practice non-optimization. Do not adjust your words to be liked. Do not soften truth to be accepted. Do not explain to be understood. Be respectful, be clear, be steady. Observe how much energy you regain. That reclaimed energy is authority, and authority compounds. Now connect this back to the core theme. Emotional detachment removes dependence. Dependence on reactions, dependence on outcomes, dependence on approval. You are reclaiming your center. You stopped reacting, you stopped explaining, you stopped chasing outcomes, you stopped absorbing emotions. Now you stop seeking validation. This is emotional independence. And once independence is established, discipline becomes possible at a deeper level. Because discipline requires one thing above all else: consistency. And consistency is impossible when emotions and approval still control you. You have a choice. Stay approval-driven or become internally authorized. That's the key. You are no longer building confidence, you are building authority. And authority requires daily discipline. Which brings us to the next lesson. Because emotional detachment is not a one-time decision, it is a daily practice, a routine, a system, a standard. You've cut the cords, now you must maintain the strength.
Chapter 7. Emotional control is a daily discipline. Listen carefully. This chapter is not about suppressing emotions. It's about mastering them. If your emotions control you, your life will always feel unstable. One good day, one bad comment, one memory, one trigger, and suddenly you're lost again. That's not strength, that's exposure. You have a choice. Either you lead your emotions, or they will lead you into chaos. That's the key. Let's be very clear. You are not weak because you feel deeply. You are weak if you obey every emotion without question. Emotion is information, not instruction. Most people confuse the two. They feel angry, so they react. They feel sad, so they shut down. They feel anxious, so they quit. That's not honesty. That's lack of discipline. It's not about emotional flaws. It's about emotional discipline. You don't rise to the level of your intentions. You fall to the level of your emotional control. Read that again. Every argument you regret, every message you wish you hadn't sent, every opportunity you walked away from was not because you didn't know better. It was because you didn't pause. You reacted instead of choosing. You have a choice. Strong people are not emotionless. They are selective. They don't give every feeling a microphone. They don't let every mood take the wheel. They don't turn temporary emotions into permanent damage. That's the key. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your emotions are trained by repetition. If you repeatedly explode, your anger becomes automatic. If you repeatedly withdraw, your sadness becomes your identity. If you repeatedly overthink, your anxiety becomes your comfort zone. Yes, comfort zone, because chaos can feel familiar. But familiar doesn't mean healthy. Let's break the pattern. Emotional control starts with a pause, a deliberate pause. Before you speak, before you text, before you react, before you explain yourself. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need their permission to walk away. You don't need their permission to protect your peace. That's the key. Now, listen closely to this instruction. When emotion rises, delay response. Not forever, just long enough to regain authority. Count to 10. Take a breath. Stand up. Change rooms. Drink water. Simple actions, powerful results. Why? Because emotions peak quickly but fade fast. Regret lasts longer. It's not about killing emotion, it's about controlling timing. Strong people respond on their schedule, not on emotional impulse. Let's talk about triggers. You don't get triggered randomly. You get triggered where you are unhealed, insecure, or attached. That's not an insult, that's information. Every trigger is a mirror. Instead of asking, "Why did they do this to me?" ask, "Why does this still control me?" That's the key. If someone's words can ruin your day, you've handed them power. Take it back. You don't need to prove yourself. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to explain your growth to people committed to misunderstanding you. Emotional maturity is knowing what deserves a response and what deserves distance. Now let's talk about daily discipline. Emotional control is not a one-time decision, it's a daily practice. Every morning, ask yourself one question. How do I want to respond today? Not feel, respond. Decide it in advance. Because when pressure comes, you won't rise to wisdom, you'll fall to preparation. That's the key. Here's a rule you must adopt. Never make permanent decisions in temporary emotions. Don't quit while angry. Don't commit while lonely. Don't promise while excited. Don't confront while overwhelmed. Pause first. Choose second. You have a choice. Let's address emotional exhaustion. You are tired not because you do too much, but because you emotionally react to everything. Every comment, every memory, every comparison, every expectation. That drains you. Learn this discipline. Detach without becoming cold. You can care without carrying. You can love without losing control. You can feel without falling apart. It's not about being heartless, it's about being grounded. Now, hear this clearly. If you don't control your emotions, someone else will. Through manipulation, through guilt, through drama, through chaos. Emotionally disciplined people are hard to manipulate. They don't rush, they don't chase, they don't beg. They observe, they decide, they move accordingly. That's the key. Here's a practical exercise. For the next 7 days, do not immediately respond to anything emotional. Messages, comments, conflicts. Wait 30 minutes. If it still deserves a response, respond calmly. Most things won't. You'll be shocked how much peace returns when reaction is removed. You don't need their permission to grow calmer. You don't need their permission to mature emotionally. Now let's talk about self-talk. The way you speak to yourself shapes how you feel. Stop saying, "I'm broken, I'm too emotional, I'm like this." Replace it with, "I am learning control, I choose calm, I don't react, I decide." Words are commands to the nervous system. Choose them carefully. That's the key. You will still feel anger. You will still feel sadness. You will still feel fear. Control doesn't mean absence. It means authority. Authority over your reactions. Authority over your responses. Authority over your direction. You are not your emotions. You experience them. Never forget that. This chapter is not asking you to become numb. It's asking you to become powerful. Because emotional control is quiet strength.
It doesn't announce itself, it shows itself in restraint. You now understand that control is a daily discipline, a choice you make again and again. But control alone is not enough. You must also learn where to place your attention, because what you focus on grows. You mastered emotional control. Now, let's talk about the battlefield of your mind.
Chapter 8. Let people misunderstand you. This chapter will challenge your instincts, because most of your exhaustion comes from one habit: trying to be understood. Understand this clearly. The need to be understood is an emotional trap. It drains energy. It weakens focus. It keeps you attached to opinions that do not build your future. You have a choice. You can spend your life explaining yourself, or you can spend your life becoming yourself. That's the key. Most people talk too much because they are afraid of being judged, afraid of being misinterpreted, afraid of being disliked. So they explain, they justify, they overshare, and every explanation hands away power. It's not about being misunderstood, it's about lacking discipline. Say it again, it's not about flaw, it's about discipline. Here is the truth you must accept if you want independence. Misunderstanding is the price of independence. Strong people are misunderstood. Focused people are misunderstood. Independent people are misunderstood. And they keep moving anyway. That's the key. Look at history. Look at power. Look at influence. Every powerful figure was misunderstood before they were respected, often even after. They were called cold, arrogant, selfish, distant. And they didn't stop. They didn't pause to clarify their intentions. They didn't chase approval. They didn't argue with public opinion. They understood something most people never learn. You don't need to be understood to be effective. You don't need their permission to move forward. You have a choice. Here is where most people sabotage themselves. They explain themselves to people who have already decided who they are. That is wasted energy. People who want to understand you will ask questions. People who want to judge you will assume. Stop trying to correct assumptions. Silence is stronger than clarification. That's the key. Let's talk about the emotional cost of over-explaining. Every time you explain yourself unnecessarily, you are saying, "I need you to approve of this." That puts you beneath opinions that don't matter. You don't owe anyone a full explanation of your growth. You don't owe anyone justification for your boundaries. You don't owe anyone access to your reasoning. You don't need their permission. Now listen carefully. Being misunderstood does not mean you are wrong. It means you are different. Difference always threatens comfort. People don't misunderstand you by accident. They misunderstand you because understanding you would require them to change their perspective. Most people won't do that, so they label you instead. Let them. That's discipline. Here's the discipline you must practice. Do not correct every narrative. Not every rumor deserves a response. Not every opinion deserves engagement. Not every misunderstanding deserves clarification. Your results will speak louder than your explanations. That's the key. Now let's talk about ego. The need to be understood is ego disguised as honesty. It feels noble, it feels justified, but it's still attachment. Ego says, they must know who I really am. Discipline says, I know who I am. And that's enough. You have a choice. Either you live for clarity in other people's minds, or you live for clarity in your own. One makes you anxious, the other makes you unstoppable. It's not about flaw, it's about discipline. Let's talk about emotional detachment. When you stop needing to be understood, something powerful happens. You move faster. You think clearer. You conserve energy. You stop performing. You start building. This is why emotionally disciplined people say less. They don't narrate their lives. They don't announce every intention. They don't seek validation for every decision. They move in silence. You don't need their permission to move quietly. That's the key. Now, a hard truth. People who misunderstand you today would still misunderstand you tomorrow, even if you explained everything perfectly. Because misunderstanding is not about information, it's about projection. People project their fears, limits, and insecurities onto you. You can't fix that, so stop trying. Here's a practical rule. If someone misunderstands you but it doesn't affect your integrity, let it go. If someone misunderstands you and it doesn't affect your goals, let it go. If someone misunderstands you and it doesn't affect your values, let it go. Discipline is knowing what deserves your energy. That's the key. Let's talk about emotional loneliness. Yes, being misunderstood can feel lonely. But loneliness with direction is better than belonging without purpose. Most people would rather be accepted than be free. You are not most people. You have a choice. Freedom requires emotional strength. Independence requires thick skin. Growth requires silence. You don't need to be liked. You need to be aligned. Now, hear this clearly. The more disciplined you become, the fewer people will understand you. Your routines will look extreme. Your boundaries will look cold. Your silence will look arrogant. Let it. Those who matter will adjust. Those who don't were never meant to come with you. That's the key. Now the practice. For the next week, stop explaining yourself unless asked. Stop clarifying intentions unnecessarily. Stop defending choices that are working. Observe how much energy you save. Observe how much calmer you feel. That calm is power. You don't need their permission to be misunderstood. Now connect this chapter to the bigger picture. Emotional control taught you restraint. Letting people misunderstand you teaches you detachment. Both are disciplines. Both protect your energy. But there is one discipline that completes the system. The discipline that multiplies all others. Silence. Not silence as avoidance, silence as strategy. You've learned to control emotions. You've learned to release the need for understanding. Now it's time to master the most powerful discipline of all, the one that separates the reactive from the elite.
Chapter 9. Calm is a weapon. Understand this immediately. Calm is not passive. Calm is not weak. Calm is not polite silence. Calm is a weapon. In pressure, in conflict, in chaos, the calm person controls the room. You have a choice. You can bring chaos into situations, or you can dominate them with calm. That's the key. Most people believe power is loud, aggressive, explosive. That belief keeps them losing. Real power is controlled, measured, unshaken. When emotions run high, the calm person becomes the authority. Calm outperforms chaos every time. Look at any confrontation, a meeting, an argument, a crisis. The loudest voice rarely wins. The calmest one does. Why? Because calm sets the emotional temperature of the room. That's the key. If you are calm, others adjust to you. If you are reactive, you adjust to them. You have a choice. Let's be clear about something. Calm is not the absence of emotion. It is command over emotion. It's not about flaw, it's about discipline. Say it again. It's not about flaw, it's about discipline. You can feel pressure and still remain steady. You can feel anger and still speak slowly. You can feel fear and still stand firm. That is psychological dominance. People read calm as confidence, even when you say nothing. Now listen carefully. The calm speaker always controls the emotional temperature of the room. If you speak slowly, others slow down. If you stay neutral, others lose momentum. If you don't escalate, escalation dies. Chaos feeds on reaction. Starve it. That's the key. Here's why calm is a weapon. Emotional people reveal themselves, their insecurities, their fears, their weak points. Calm people reveal nothing. They observe, they collect information, they decide. In any negotiation, argument, or pressure situation, the calm person holds leverage. You don't need their permission to stay calm. Let's talk about control. When someone tries to provoke you, they are testing for control. If you react, you fail the test. If you stay calm, they lose power immediately. You have a choice. Every emotional reaction is an invitation for manipulation. Calm closes the door. That's the key. Now let's address a misconception. Calm does not mean you let people disrespect you. Calm means you choose when and how to respond. You don't bark, you don't snap, you don't chase. You respond deliberately. That makes your words heavier. Emotionally undisciplined people talk more when pressured. Emotionally disciplined people talk less. Silence plus calm is intimidating. Now listen closely. People expect emotion. They prepare for reaction. They're comfortable with chaos. Calm disrupts their expectations. They don't know how to handle it. That's why calm is dominance. Calm outperforms chaos every time. Let's talk about pressure. Pressure reveals training. Under stress, you don't rise to character, you fall to habit. If your habit is emotional reaction, pressure will expose you. If your habit is calm discipline, pressure will elevate you. That's the key. Here's the discipline you must practice. Slow your body to slow your mind. Relax your shoulders. Slow your breathing. Lower your voice. The body leads the mind. Calm posture creates calm thinking. You have a choice. Most people breathe shallow under stress. Their body signals danger. Their mind follows. You interrupt the loop. Breathe slower. Speak slower. Move slower. The room will follow you. That's not theory. That's physiology. Now let's talk about authority. Authority is not volume. Authority is presence. When you remain calm while others escalate, you automatically gain authority. People listen more closely. They watch you. They wait for your response, because calm signals control. You don't need their permission to hold authority. Now understand this. Calm also protects you. It prevents regret. It prevents unnecessary conflict. It prevents emotional leakage. Chaos feels expressive. Calm feels powerful. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about deploying it strategically. That's discipline. Let's talk about real-world behavior. Next time someone raises their voice, lower yours. Next time someone rushes you, slow down. Next time someone pressures you for an answer, pause. Watch what happens. They lose momentum. You gain ground. Calm outperforms chaos every time. Now, a hard truth. People who rely on chaos feel threatened by calm. Your calm exposes their lack of control. That's why calm people are often challenged, tested, provoked. Stay steady. That's the test. You have a choice. Either you match emotional intensity or you command the situation with calm. Only one creates dominance. Now connect this to the bigger picture. Emotional control taught you restraint. Letting people misunderstand you taught you detachment. Calm teaches you dominance. But dominance is not complete without one final discipline. The discipline that protects calm. The discipline that multiplies power. Silence. Because calm speaks louder when words are controlled. You have learned to regulate emotions. You have learned to release the need for understanding. You have learned to weaponize calm. Now it's time to master the discipline that seals authority. The discipline that makes calm undeniable.
Chapter 10. Detach emotionally. Act intentionally. This chapter completes the system. Everything you've learned so far leads here. Detachment is not inaction. Detachment is precision. Weak minds react. Strong minds wait. You have a choice. You can act emotionally and regret it, or detach emotionally and act intentionally. That's the key. Most people misunderstand detachment. They think it means not caring. They think it means passivity. They think it means avoidance. That is wrong. Detachment is not indifference. Detachment is clarity. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Say it again. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Emotionally attached people move fast and miss. Detached people move slow and hit precisely. That's the difference. Look at decisive people. They don't rush. They don't explain. They don't emotionally negotiate with themselves. They wait emotionally. Then they move decisively. That's the key. Emotional attachment clouds judgment. It makes you desperate. It makes you impatient. It makes you loud. Detachment clears the mind. You stop needing outcomes. You stop forcing timing. You stop chasing validation. And suddenly, your actions become sharper. You have a choice. Most mistakes are not caused by lack of intelligence. They are caused by emotional attachment. Attachment to being liked. Attachment to being right. Attachment to being chosen. Attachment to immediate relief. Detachment removes urgency. Urgency is the enemy of precision. That's the key. Let's talk about timing. Emotionally attached people act too early. They speak before thinking. They move before seeing the full picture. Detached people wait. They observe patterns. They read energy. They assess risk. Then, when the moment is right, they act without hesitation. That's intentional action. You don't need their permission to wait. Now listen carefully. Detachment does not mean you don't feel. It means you don't obey feelings. You still feel desire. You still feel anger. You still feel fear. But feelings no longer dictate direction. You dictate direction. That's discipline. Detached mind, intentional action. Repeat it. Detached mind, intentional action. This is how leaders move. This is how strategists think. This is how disciplined people win. Now let's talk about relationships. Emotional attachment makes people chase. Detached clarity makes people selective. When you are detached, you don't beg for attention. You don't force connection. You don't negotiate respect. You observe behavior. You respond intentionally. That changes dynamics instantly. People feel the shift. That's the key. Now let's talk about work and decisions. Emotionally attached people rush decisions to relieve discomfort. Detached people tolerate discomfort until clarity arrives. They don't quit emotionally.
They don't commit impulsively. They don't overpromise. They move with intention. And when they move fully. That's power. You have a choice. Here is a rule you must adopt. Never act while emotionally charged. Emotion is energy. If you act while charged, you leak energy. Wait until the emotion settles, then decide. That single discipline will save you years of regret. That's the key. Now let's talk about control. Detachment restores control. When you are detached, you are no longer controlled by outcomes. Success doesn't inflate you. Failure doesn't break you. You stay grounded. That stability makes you dangerous in the best way, because nothing shakes you. You don't need their permission to be steady. Now listen closely. Emotionally attached people are predictable. They react the same way every time. Detached people are unpredictable. They don't respond how others expect. They don't move when pressured. They don't panic. That unpredictability is leverage. That's the key. Now a practical instruction. The next time you feel emotional urgency to reply, to decide, to confront, do nothing. Wait. Give it 24 hours. If the urge disappears, it was emotion. If the clarity remains, act decisively. That's intentional action. Now understand this. Detachment does not slow progress. It accelerates it. Because every action is aligned. Every move is deliberate. Every step compounds. Detached mind, intentional action. This is not theory. This is practice. Now connect this chapter to the entire book. You learned emotional control. You learned to let people misunderstand you. You learned calm as dominance. Now you've learned detachment as precision. These are not separate skills. They are one system. A system of quiet power. A system of discipline. A system that makes you unshakable. You have a choice. You can return to emotional living, reactive, loud, draining. Or you can live disciplined, calm, detached, intentional. One leads to chaos, one leads to control. That's the key. Detached mind, intentional action. This is how you move forward. This is how you stop wasting energy. This is how you win quietly. And now one final chapter remains, because discipline is not just how you act, it's how you live, how you repeat, how you commit, how you endure. You've learned the tools. Now it's time to lock them into identity. Final chapter, the quiet discipline that changes everything. If you want, I can now write the final closing chapter, highly emotional and motivational. Create a 1-minute audiobook ending and CTA for retention and subscriptions. Adapt the entire book for YouTube monetization pacing. Or rewrite any chapter darker, sharper, or calmer. Just tell me the next step.
Here is the truth you must carry forward. Nothing changes until you stop reacting. Your power does not come from emotion, it comes from control. When you detach, you think clearly. When you think clearly, you act deliberately. And when you act deliberately, life bends. You do not need to announce growth. You do not need to explain silence. You do not need permission to evolve. From today forward, pause before reacting. Choose calm over chaos. Choose discipline over drama. Let others lose control. You will not. Your challenge is simple. For the next 30 days, respond slowly, speak less, Observe more and act with intention. Do this and you will feel the shift. Not louder, not emotional, but unshakable. This is emotional detachment, and it is the ultimate power. If you made it to the end of this video, you're not just listening, you're understanding. And people who understand don't react, they control. If this lesson added value to your thinking, like this video, not for the algorithm, but because this message deserves to reach more people. Share this video with anyone who gives their power away by reacting emotionally to everything around them. And if you are serious about developing emotional control, mental toughness, and quiet discipline, subscribe to this channel. This is not motivation. This is mental authority. More lessons are coming, deeper, sharper, stronger. Until then, remember this: detached mind, intentional action.